Was Trisha able to get in? Do you see Trisha? The other interpreter?
Yeah, she's on her way. I think we just were waiting for the email, but I believe she got it. I've been texting with her.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to check.
Definitely. I'll be able to start either way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Also, hi, nice to meet you.
Let me show my face. Hi. Nice to meet you. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Okay, so Donnay, I'm gonna share my screen first briefly, and then I'm gonna pass it to you. How do folks feel? Are folks good?
Great.
Okay. Let me share my screen. All right. Hey, everyone. So excited to have you here, whether you're joining us from our YouTube live stream or on Zoom. I'm super excited for our second day and final day of our mini institute for the Abolitionist Youth Organizing Institute. This is a space we created as an extension of our larger institute. We just finished about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks of going through organizing, tenets of organizing, abolitionist organizing, and PIC abolition, restorative and transformative justice with a group of 60 young people, and wanted to open up more of these sessions to a larger group of folks who weren't able to be in our institute. And so excited for this to be our second day of that. And so we're going to get into a de-escalation session with our amazing facilitator for today, Donnay. And before we do that, I just want to make some announcements, offer some gratitudes, and share who's in the space with us today. Want to start by thanking our fiscal sponsor for the Institute, Flux Factory. Thank you so much. This would not have been possible without y'all. And also the Barnard Center for Research on Women for doing our live stream. Shout out to Hope and Sophie, who are supporting with that on YouTube. And we also want to shout out the other folks in the room. I'm Allison. I'm the youth training coordinator for Project Mia. We also have Paige, who is our Clarice Dunham Fellow, who is also collecting resources from all of the sessions to make sure they're shared back with y'all. We also have our amazing tech support, Donnay. And then we have our two wonderful interpreters, ASL interpreters, Juan and Trisha, and also our closed captioner, Teddy Jackson. I encourage folks, if you are watching through our live stream on YouTube, I encourage you to email, send an email to the email in the description box so that you can join us via Zoom. If you need ASL interpretation or closed caption so that it's more accessible to you in this space. And then we'll also have Laura, who will be doing graphic notes for us that will be available after the session in our Padlet. And just naming for folks our values. Take a look, maybe pick something to carry with you throughout our time together today that you're holding as a value for yourself in this collective space. And then also our commitments, really committing to, in these spaces, listening deeply. We're going to be talking about de-escalation and maybe some challenges that come up, maybe certain situations that you have moved through and experienced will come up in this space. So we're really asking that y'all be present, be grounded, and also be really generative and generous in your sharing and your listening in this space. And also, you know, it is a shorter session. We're here together for 2 hours. Donnay has set up breaks for us, and take breaks when you need it. Tend to yourself, care for yourself, do what you need to do for you. And then our Institute Padlet, I've been talking a little bit about resources that will be available to y'all. And this is where you will find those. So please use this link to be able to access resources from these mini Institute sessions, but also from the larger Institute. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to our amazing, brilliant facilitator for today, Donnay Edmund. She is a healer, a dancer, herbalist, all of the things. And I'm gonna give her the spaciousness to introduce herself more fully to y'all. And so appreciate you being here with us today, Donnay. So excited for your session.
Thank you everyone who is like working, moving, creating all of this coming together. Thank you, Allison, specifically for inviting me into this space. And thank you everyone who is in this moment watching and later maybe watching. Much gratitude to all of our sacred connections that we can be just in this space, learning from each other, even through like, I feel like the new wave of like how we can use the virtual world to connect is really beautiful. So I just want to express gratitude for that. And so we're going to be doing some thinking about really how do we live in our bodies? How do we live in our bodies in connection to other people? Really showing up to self-awareness so that we can move through like difficult moments, right? And so I'll be using some terms in a space that we will kind of collectively define. But one of those is definitely going to be a focus on de-escalation. What does it mean to decrease the level of tension, to decrease the level of conflict, to stay safe, to keep one another safe? And so I always like use this quote that I really love from June Jordan, who writes, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." It's actually a beautiful song that Sweet Honey and the Rock created with just this lyric. And I love it because it's an offering of like, we don't have to look to anyone else because we are here and together, like what we need to create, we will do that and we will be that. And we already are that and already are becoming that. So I'm excited to be in the space today to think about like, how do we, if we're not going to rely on systems of punishment, if we're not going to rely on systems that harm us and re-traumatize us, what are we going to rely on? How do we create that together? So a little bit about me. My name is Donnay. I use she, they pronouns. I am a dreamer, daughter, movement fairy. I love the earth. I believe deeply in liberation. And I always say, like, I grew up working class, grew up with many mothers in the street playing double dutch. Like, many people told me when I had to go home, I like had so much support. My mother worked probably like, and still does work like around 70 hours a week. And so I really have always been based in community. And so, yes, I come as an artist, as an organizer, as a yoga teacher. A lot of this de-escalation, or as a yoga practicer, a lot of this de-escalation work comes through a couple of places that I've been in my life learning this, through my organizing work, through my theater of the oppressed work, and through my work with the Center for Anti-Violence Education that does, for 45 years, have been working on ending violence and creating communities free from violence. And CAE does that through both self-defense programs and started doing empowerment self-defense 45 years ago with mostly queer women, expanded to more trans and gender non-conforming people, and really saying, how are we going to stay safe on the streets? And defining self-defense really expansively as anything and everything we do to keep ourselves safe. And then created upstander work, which is our bystander intervention program. So a lot of the materials from this presentation today are from that space. And then I also work with an amazing community organization that does liberation education in Hudson, New York, that's called Kite's Nest, that I just am transitioning into, where I'm the social justice leadership director. And so I just want to take a moment to think all of my guides, all of my teachers, including thanking all of your guides and all of your teachers for being in this space. And maybe name them and celebrate them every day. I also think it's Assata Shakur's birthday today. And so I want to lift up Assata Shakur, freedom fighter. I want to lift up all the uprisings that are going on across the globe right now, that we remember our siblings everywhere are fighting for our freedom and are trying to figure it out. And it gets messy, but it is possible. So I want to introduce some community liberation practices. I was in a workshop with one of the founders of Woke Foods, who's leading a lot of work around like food justice and how do we do work around colorism in our communities. And they brought up this concept of like not only community agreements, but let's have community liberation practices, right? Because a lot of times we see community agreements and it's like, yes, those are things I aspire to, but am I practicing those? And so I love the idea of just calling things a practice. Like, what is one of these things that we struggle to do when we're coming up with like community agreements, and what are the things that we like lean into really deeply with a lot of ease? And so I'm going to offer some of these, and I would love for folks to reflect on that. Like, what comes easy and what do you still need to work on? So one of those is none of us know everything. Together we know a lot. And we'll talk a lot about like, how do we decenter our ego and lean into collective knowledge in this space? That conflict is a place of curiosity and growth. And how do we understand that in a very conflict averse, at least in the West, very conflict averse society, except clearly we're not that conflict averse because we're the biggest like military, have the biggest military in the world, right? But in terms of conflict, interpersonal conflict. And then thinking about decolonization and decolonization as a lifelong process. And I'm bringing up decolonizations because we're going to be talking about different contexts and concepts that were brought by psychotherapists and, you know, a lot of white men who weren't thinking about power and oppression and liberation in the same way that we're dreaming into. And so even though some of the concepts I'm like, oh, these work, some of them we're going to leave behind, right? And that just honoring that some of the legacies that nonviolent communication, which we'll talk about in this workshop, come from are not the ones that like are closest to what we may want to practice, but how can we take the gems? And so as we learn, use, and question tools, we get to keep what we want and what works, and we get to release the rest. And so those are offerings for today, and just echoing, take a break and breathing as we center ourselves. And so I'm going to do a little bit of a grounding with you all now. So wherever you are, if you are able to, start to just pay attention to your body. If you're sitting, maybe you lean back, maybe have your feet on the floor, maybe give your attention to your wrists. Sometimes I'm like on the computer all day and haven't even like moved my wrist intentionally. So rolling your wrist, maybe rolling and stretching your hands and your arms, maybe rolling your shoulders back a couple of times. Also, from behind our phones, we're often slouching. And then just become aware of your body, become aware of what your body is doing. And if you would like to, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes or you can soften your gaze. If you're outside and you're moving, maybe you want to gaze at something that's beautiful, the sunshine, the sky, a tree ahead of you, something that centers you. And kind of begin also to maybe roll out your neck in a half moon. And then once you've done that, once you've like stretched out your body, begin to recognize, like, are there any parts of your body that today maybe need a little bit more attention? Like, is your neck a little tense, or you realize your back is hurting, or your feet that take us so many places are hurting, or any part of your body that's you need to put more attention into. And then become aware of your breathing. We don't have to change our breathing. Just become aware of the rise and fall of our bellies. Maybe become aware of the pressure in our nose as air releases. And I was reading this book by Sabine Selassie, and that's how you say her name. And she is a Buddhist teacher from Ethiopia who wrote this beautiful book called You Belong, all about what does it mean to belong. And I often talk about this in the workshop, like we need to belong as people. And so keeping your eyes closed, thinking about a space where you feel deep connection, maybe deep belonging, maybe deep gratitude, joy, calmness, peace. Think about a place where you feel those things. Maybe you're there right now, or maybe you really want to be there, right? And as you're thinking about this space, think about what is around you. So what is under your feet? Are you imagining you are on sand or in the grass or on a rocky mountain? Are you wearing giant boots in really crisp snow? Or are you on your grandmother's hardwood floors? So think about where you are in this space. Are you on something soft, like a soft blanket? So as you think about where you are, think about what sounds are around you. Are there birds? Are there loved ones talking? Is it your favorite food being cooked and you can hear the sizzles of the oil in the pot? So what kind of sounds are around you? And then what smells are around you? Are you smelling salty ocean water? Are you smelling something, your favorite baked good? And then think about what colors are coming up and what temperatures. Is it 60 degrees? Is it 80 degrees? Is it 20 degrees and you're inside at a fire? So really begin to call in the textures, smells, sounds, and beings around you in that space. And if you found that place, I invite you now to put one hand, if you are able to, put one hand on your belly and the other hand on your heart. And take a deep breath in for 3, 1, 2, 3. And release for 1, 2, 3. And you can rub your heart a little bit, bring in sensation back in your body and move your feet and your hands and any of your body parts that you need to. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. And I often start with this grounding because I really want us to remember as much and as often as we can the places, even if it's one place, even if it's one moment in our minds that we can return to when things come up, right? Because we're going to be talking about a lot of awareness. We're going to be talking about trauma. We're going to be talking about like how do we move through difficult situations and where safety can be compromised, right? And so just knowing that even if we can't physically go somewhere, that in our mind's perception, in our intuition, that we can remember and imagine this place and return to. So when something's coming up and we're feeling triggered or we're feeling super tense, that we can go back to these places and try and visualize them. And if anybody wants to share with someone later, like the place that they talked about, please do. Because sometimes I'm like, ooh, I want to go to that place that you just went. I don't know if Allison, you wanted to share. So you came on, somebody came on camera if you wanted to share. So we're going to be moving into talking about conflict. So the first question I wanted to ask folks is, what influenced us in our ability to manage conflict? Like if you think about conflict, like what are some things that influence our ability? Like if you've ever have conflict in the home or conflict at school, or at work, or in the streets, like what comes up in our ability to manage it? So some of the things I'll name are that sometimes it's learned in childhood. Like I know some of my patterns, like I just was with my mother last week and the same thing she was doing, like when she got impatient, I was like, oh my God, I get impatient just like that. I'm like, how can that become an embodied practice? I haven't lived with my mother in over a decade, yet, some of the things that she does, I do the exact same way. So a lot of our ways of managing conflict are learned in our childhood. That a lot of the ways that we manage conflict can be conditioned from previous trauma or conflict that we've had or seen. And that, our ability to manage conflict really it's kind of learned within community. So the next question I want to ask is how do you respond to conflict? So a lot of times people are like, I don't know, or, I think I respond really calmly. And so I'm going to ask this a couple of questions to get us thinking, like, what is the thing that you go to maybe 50% of the time, or 60% of the time, or 90% of the time? Like, I know for a fact that I can be very conflict avoidant. Like, I have a conflict with somebody, and I'm like, I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to address it right away. Like, I get very, like, something literally like a lump forms in my throat, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. So I know when that's happening, I have to check in with myself and be like, is that the most effective strategy right now? And sometimes being conflict avoidant is useful. Like, if someone's about to fight you and you're avoiding that conflict, that's what kept us safe, right? And so there's no judgment about making that choice. It's just like, is that the choice we want to make every time? And so the more we can be aware of how we respond to conflict, the better we can make choices that don't leave us in a narrow or limited space. And so one of the questions I like to ask is, how do you manage conflict when you are in an argument with a family member? How do you manage conflict when you made an agreement with somebody at work and they said they were going to hold something down or do something and they didn't complete their task? And now you have to, at the last minute, have to do everything. Thinking about how you hold conflict then. How much you manage conflict when you're in a disagreement with your partner about something that you have been trying to work out for months, and it seems like it's really hard to move through. So thinking about, are those different? Or how do you manage conflict when someone is too close to your space? Like, they're in your personal space and you really want them to get out of your face. You don't know them. You don't want them there. Like, how much you manage conflict then? So a lot of times we might respond different depending on the context, and that's really important. And also sometimes I don't always like to use the word naturally, but we might default to what we've been conditioned to do or what we've done before, right? And what often, people who are coming from a space of thinking about care and how trauma operates say, like, it's okay for us to have like certain trauma responses like that. Those protected us at one point. Those kept us alive. Those kept us in a space of being able to survive. And so we should thank our bodies for knowing that and doing that and going to that to try and keep us safe and present. And like, we also can be curious of like, oh, is this always going to help me? So some of the ways that we might respond to conflict are in fight mode, right? Like, I'm going to confront this. I'm going to say what I need to say right now, or I'm going to get up in their face, or I'm going to get physically confrontational. Other ways might be flight, right? Like, I'm going to be in a walk away, run away mode, freeze, like zoning out. I know, like, for me, like dissociation, like, can happen. Like, I remember there's been so many conflicts where I just freeze. Like, even one time my dog just had like something in its mouth, but she was like shaking frantically, and I was like, oh my God, what is happening to my dog? And so all I could do was I just froze, and I was like, I told my partner, I was like, something happened, but I couldn't do anything. My body literally stopped. So another form of like just dealing with conflict can be the freeze, zone out, or even dissociate. Like, there's been so many memories that I don't even recall because of the protection in me, just like dissociated from that moment. And then fawn. So sometimes when someone has harmed us or hurt us, or we've been in conflict with them, we can go into caretaker mode, like, especially when it's with a parent. Like, we don't want to displease our parents. And we did something as a kid and your parents got really angry with you, and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, Mom, I really didn't want to make you mad, or like, what can I do? Or how can I help, right? Like, we go into like, even though maybe they responded to us with a lot of aggression, or like more aggression than what we even did, right? Maybe we dropped something by accident, and then your parent grabs your arm and gets really mad at you, right? So, and offering some hard care on sharing that, but like, maybe our response is like to care for them, right? And so fawning is something that is also a way that people might respond to conflict, right? And so thinking about those ways that our body just brain goes into to protect us, how can we notice and transform some of the ways we communicate? So one of the things that I think is really interesting is that 55% of our communication is nonverbal. And I'm always like, okay, that makes sense. I'm also like, as somebody who I'm like, I talk with my hands, I talk with my body, I talk with my eyes. Like, I can definitely see how a lot of our communication is already happening before we say something. And so think about like if you're feeling angry at somebody, you probably might be a little tense. You probably might be a little bit like having your head to the side, right? Or depending on our cultures, that might show up in our body in different ways than we would when we're tired or when we're sleepy or when we're hangry, right? So like a lot of our communication is nonverbal. And then that can be through eye contact, body language, personal space, physical traits, height, race, gender. Are we towering over somebody, right? And it also can be informed by like the differences in our cultural norms. And then other forms is about 38% of our communication is our tone. So how are we saying what we're saying? And then only about 7% is what we say, our spoken words. And so literally the majority, 90% of what we're sharing is around like how we're doing it, not necessarily what we're saying. So thinking about that in terms of like how we want to communicate with people next time, right? We can be saying something that's kind, but if we're saying it like this, that's going to communicate something really different. And so sometimes we actually do this like a little activity, which is like, it's not how you say it, but what you say. So you might say you ask a lot of questions, but what happens when you say it in a suspicious tone, like you ask a lot of questions, or in a happy tone, like you ask a lot of questions, or in an irritable tone, like you ask a lot of questions, right? Like all of those moments, if you try that, and I give folks a little moment to try that, then you might, if you notice like you saying it yourself, you might like feel in your body a little bit different, right? Like I know when in a happy tone, like my body comes like this, and in a suspicious tone, I'm like, and in an irritable tone, I'm like backing away, right? So automatically our body, our face, our smiles begin to change depending on how we're saying something. So thinking about like how tone is super impactful in communicating. And also some communication tips for when we are moving through conflict is like reflecting and rephrasing what you heard. Like I heard you say that you were feeling uncomfortable today. Is that what you were feeling? And so just sometimes parroting back, sharing back what somebody just said to them, so they could be like, yes, that's what I was saying. Thank you for hearing me. Or no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I'm saying. And we don't have to have a feeling or judgment if that's not what they're saying, because it's an invitation for them to clarify. And so we don't have to make any assumptions because they get to say, no, I wasn't feeling uncomfortable. I actually was feeling angry. And then we have clarity and we can move from there about what to do next. So another thing is like expressing gratitude and appreciation. Like, thank you so much for, bringing that concern up to me. I really want to tend to that. And I'm really grateful that you brought it up with me. I just want to appreciate you for talking to me about this, right? Just starting with that space, even if you're moving through conflict, can be a way to open up a space of compassion and vulnerability. So using and instead of but. So I'm like the queen of but. I'd be like, but I didn't do this, but you didn't do this. Like, so oftentimes but negate to whatever was said before. Like, I think it was really great that you made that dinner, but it was nasty. Or, but you should have put more salt in it. Or, but, it's like everything that you said before is like no longer thought about. So instead of using but, like using and. So I know you were trying to help, and what you did really made me feel unsafe. Or I know you didn't mean to, and I really appreciate that you're trying to listen. And I want to recognize that I feel like I'm feeling nervous because I feel like your tone right now doesn't feel, or isn't as welcoming as I would like it to be, right? So sharing something like that. And then using humor. So sometimes using humor to lighten a moment. And I would say these are communication tips. Maybe if you know a person, if they're your partner or a friend, or you're in organizing space with them, or you're at work, right? These are like maybe more communication tips I might use if I knew somebody. So using humor instead of sarcasm. So thinking about like, maybe you just say a joke, or maybe you're like, oh yeah, like just bringing in something lighter to lighten up the moment. Like, yeah, I've done that too. I do it all the time. Like, I totally understand. Like, and then trying to give them the feedback. So also wanting to open up, we're about to go talk about into nonviolent communication. So we talked about communication tips. So I wanted to think about nonviolent communication practices. And so there's an amazing workbook that I love, and you can get it free or you could buy it. It's $20. It's Also, there's a free PDF online called Decolonizing Nonviolent Communication, written by Manachi, who does a lot of work around NVC and how do we decolonize it. And if you have heard of nonviolent communication, amazing. If you haven't, great. We're going to talk about it a little bit today, right? And this is, I would say, using NVC when the level of conflict is low. So if we're saying like green is calm and yellow is like cautionary, it's getting a little tense, like maybe that's the zone that you're using nonviolent communication in. If someone's about to fight you, or if someone's screaming at you at the top of their lungs, or if someone's up in your face, you know, maybe nonviolent communication is not going to be the most effective strategy at that moment, right? So this is more so like, okay, there's continuous conflict at work, or there's continuous conflict in my organizing space, and how are we ever going to get anything done if we can't even hear each other? We can't even listen to each other. So thinking about that, then this is when we might want to use nonviolent communication. And so this is a quote from the workbook, which is like, I think it's like 60 pages, and it has like coloring, and it's super beautiful. And so I really encourage people to look at it. And so nonviolent communication, as set forth by Rosenberg, taught by many people, because this is like something that's very used, will tell you that you and only you are responsible for your own needs. That if you're feeling angry, irritated, sad, it's not because someone else did, but it's because of something that's going on inside of you. But this stance misses a clear point, that we are interdependent beings who cannot survive well without the integrated support of those around us. And it also misses the acknowledgement of systems of oppression, power, and which diminish options for consent and agency for certain bodies. And so we don't want to teach nonviolent communication in that way, right? That's a fucked up way to teach nonviolent communication. She offers. And so thinking about like, how do we want to teach nonviolent communication in a way that honors like, no, actually, like sometimes my need isn't met because I'm oppressed, because I'm low income, because I'm Black, because I'm queer, because I'm trans, right? Like, no, this is sometimes like my needs cannot only be met by me. And we're in this capitalist, individualistic society. We are not always thinking that we're a collective, but we are. We need each other to survive. And I think that one thing that this pandemic has showed us is just that we need each other. So with all that said, she offers that is one of the clearest ways, this is still from the workbook, to combat systemic power over, so having power over people, is through the reclamation of our own agency. And so asking our thoughts, she said something in the book around like, every thought I have in my head, I question how I got it there. Because I know I live in this system that's about so many systems of oppression, whether that be transphobia, racism, anti-Blackness, xenophobia, queerphobia, heteronormativity, and patriarchy. That there's all these systems, whether I want to or not, if I'm scrolling on Instagram, or if I'm walking down the street and I see a billboard, or if I'm at my school or at my work environment, where all these systems of oppression play out that might affect me. And so it's really important to be like, who put these thoughts here? And where did I learn this truth? And is this the only truth? Can there be multiple truths? So she offers this in the workbook. And one of the most beautiful things I think she also talks about is like the same thing that basically produces like stress in our body is also a tool for us to grow our awareness, so we can figure out like, how do we have increased agency and increased choice? So I'm going to introduce this concept. And so this concept, nonviolent communication, one of the tools is OFNR. And OFNR means observations, feelings, needs, and requests. So one of the things that we want to do when we're moving through nonviolent communication is make an observation. So a lot of times we're making a judgment, and I'll use a really simple one. Maybe I was supposed to use my partner's car, and they're supposed to pick me up at work, I don't know, at 3 p.m. And every day they're coming at 3:40 or 3:50. Like, instead of being like, you're always late, or you don't care, or you're not being considerate, which are all judgments, or you're making me feel frustrated. The observation would be like, I'm noticing that every day you're arriving around 3:30 or 3:45, right? That's all I'm doing is just making a statement about what is happening. And so it's not about a comparison. It's not about like having an analysis or an opinion. It's just what happened. And sometimes it's hard for us. Another example is like somebody leaves dirty dishes in the sink and we're like, you're nasty or you're lazy, right? Instead of saying the observation, I'm noticing there's dishes left in the sink, right? So we really want to be just making the understanding state, like said, of what we're experiencing. And then thinking about like, what is our feeling? So our feelings, first of all, only relate to our own bodies. So what we're going through. So no one can make us feel any type of way. Because if you think about it, somebody could be screaming in your face and you can feel calm. I mean, obviously, like what we want to refrain from saying is like, I feel like you're nasty, or I feel like you don't care about me, right? Because that's not really about you. Like feelings are about what lives in our body and what is moving through our emotion because of the experience, our life experiences that brought us there, right? Our own traumas, our own like ideas, right? Like I might have a feeling that, oh, you're just like my mother, because maybe my mother was always late, right? And so, but acknowledging like, no, this is my personal understanding of the world. So a feeling I might say is like, I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling hurt, right? That, and then making the need, like I need to be home at an early enough time to have time to get ready for the next day, right? So that's your need, and then making a request. And one of the most important things about requests is that they should be concrete and specific. So it should be kind of a phrase that's like what you do want instead of what you don't want. And it should be shared like kindly, but firmly and clearly. And so a request also means that that person has the agency to say yes, no, maybe, right? So it's not a demand. And so I can't say you need to get here on time, or like, I need you to show up at this time at 3:00 every day. Like the request might be like, how can I support you to get there a little bit earlier? Is there anything I can do? Or is it possible for you to arrive at 3 p.m.? Or can I give you a call right like 15 minutes before work to remind you? Or is it better for me to find another way to get home, right? So like our requests have to allow the person to still have agency if we're trying to practice nonviolent communication, right? If we're trying to restore or balance collective choice. So that's how we would use OFNR. And so I'm going to put in the chat the breakdown, which is observation, feelings, needs, and requests. And I also want to acknowledge that we don't always talk like this. Like I might not say, I noticed that you didn't come at 3:45. I was feeling hurt. I need to get home early. And so I request that you come get me earlier. Is that possible? Like we're not robots, so we might not say it like that, but it might be like, I really want to get home earlier. Is it possible for you to come get me? I'm feeling like a little like nervous because I feel like I don't have time to like really like ground when I'm home. And I've been noticing that you've been arriving at 4 every day. What can I do to support you? Right? Like whatever way that you say it, you can say it as you are a human being. You don't have to say it in a very robotic way, but this is just an offering. And sometimes our request might sound like more of a statement, right? Like than a question, but trying to have it as a question is really important. So we're going to have observations, feelings, needs, and then our request. We're going to do a little like example that I'll go through with you. So the situation is that one partner has been laid off and is really depressed, and another partner has begun working another job to make up for the loss of income. So the partner who is home has been leaving the house messy and has become increasingly quick to yell, So how could you use nonviolent communication to address this? And I can't see folks' comments or who's on here, but I will leave this. I will ask folks to answer, and then perhaps the folks who are doing tech can share what people said. So what might be an observation that you can make in this situation? What might be the observation in this situation? Maybe Allison, are you able to like see folks chat? Because I can't. And if, okay, now I can. So noticing that they're being irritable, an observation would be that the house has been very nasty, the house has been. So their change of behavior, yeah. So I want to address, so these are really good offerings. I want to like hear them. So noticing that someone's being irritable, so that can be seen as an opinion, right? Because if we're saying, I'm noticing that you're irritable, they might be like, I'm not irritable. What are you talking about? I'm actually frustrated. I'm actually tired, right? So, or even noticing they change behavior. If someone's depressed and you tell them their behavior changed, like that might bring up feelings for them. So we want to really make the observation, like what we are able to, what are we, not what we personally feel like we're experiencing, but what can we all say as a basis, like, yes, this is happening. Yes, so I know that you've been laid off. I know that I'm seeing that the house has been messy, right? Like those are observations that I saw folks put in the chat. So, and it's something that we can clearly all like, yeah, you were laid off. We can't really argue that you weren't laid off. We know that's true. And if the house is messy, like maybe there could be a little bit of argument about that, but we kind of know if the house is messy, the house is messy. So we want to keep our observations like that level. Like people can't, like the least contest, like, is it contesting? Like the least conflict can happen. So yeah. So then like what might be the feeling? What might be the feelings coming up for you? And folks can name that in the chat. So the observation is I noticed that I know that you've been laid off, and I'm noticing the house has been messy lately. What might be the feelings that are coming up with you or with this partner? You can answer in the chat. Yeah. So I felt frustrated. I felt overwhelmed with the yelling and the added responsibility of cleaning. I'm feeling anxious. Or I'm feeling frustrated about doing extra housework. Yeah, these are like what you're feeling. I'm feeling tired. Yeah, like super, like somebody might be able to empathize. They might feel like that too, right? I'm feeling exhausted because I'm cleaning and working. So yeah, these are really good things. Like maybe these are points of empathy, and maybe it's like a way we say, like, I know, like I'm here to support you, and I want to express this. Like I know you're moving through a lot, and here's what I'm moving through, right? Like saying it in a way, it doesn't have to be in this order because you want to like build in them being able to receive it, right? And then what might be the need? What is the need that you have? To rest. Yeah, so I need rest. I need communication. I need to communicate differently. I need support to clean the house and to keep the house clean. Yeah. And what about the request? Could the request be? How can we work together to keep the house cleaner? Yeah, like at least it's super. Then it could be like, I'm sorry, I can't clean, and you can be like, well, okay, we need to figure this out. Like I need to get my friends to help, or I need to save up money to have somebody come help me clean, right? Like that's a really opening. Or requesting, is it possible for you to clean up behind yourself? not yelling, trying to pick up one thing. Is it possible that we can try to pick up one thing like anytime we can? Like, let's both commit to like one thing we're picking up a day, or one area that we're working on a day. Is that something you can do? Right. So these are ways that we might be able to move through. Thank you for answering those. That we might be able to like move through nonviolent communication. And something about it that I feel like really works is like, it's easy in the moment when we're feeling something like to just be frustrated. And that's what we start with. Like, I'm frustrated. Or what is the problem here? What's going on? And then like the way we have entered the situation doesn't leave room for there to be solutions. Or like we're already so like cut off because we're not naming like what our needs are, that we're just at the place of like ranting about what doesn't work, or getting out what doesn't, or venting, right? And then we never get to the point of like, okay, what can we do to change? What can we do to shift? What can we do to create, open up possibilities? Or to communicate that like, no, I can't clean that. I can't do that. I can't meet that need. Then like knowing somebody can't meet a need is a lot of information for us, because then we're like, okay, this person can't do this. What am I going to do? And what is my community going to do? And so we're using this one, but this, nonviolent communication could even be used like when partners are going through really serious conflict, right? Or it could be used and you're trying to keep yourself safe. Or it could be used with our parents, or it could be used with our friends who are in a conflict, right? Like we could begin to practice like, yeah, these are my feelings and I'm going to be responsible for my feelings, knowing that we're interdependent and interconnected. And I'm going to now say like, what can we create that's going to shift this condition that we're in? So that is nonviolent communication. And so we're going to take a pause. I think we can take a pause now. And then we'll go into thinking about de-escalation. So like, what do we do when things get more tense? So this is like, things are like not feeling the best, but we can still talk. What if things are more escalated? What do we do? So let's take like a 10-minute break, and then we can come back to go into de-escalation. And if anybody has any questions, you can drop them in the chat now, or any examples that you want to work through, and then we'll look at them when we come back from the break.
So we're coming back at 12:58 Eastern time.
Awesome. Hi. Let's start to come back from our break, if we can. Give a maybe, I don't know, give a thumbs up or back in the chat, and then I'll know we're back. And if anybody has any questions for those who are back and want to share, lift up any questions you have, if you're like, oh, how would I deal with this situation using nonviolent communication? Feel free to put in the chat. If it's at like a level that won't like be triggering, and if you think it is, like maybe write it, like DM me or DM one of the panelists.
We did have one person who put a question in the Q&A from earlier asking about when you talked about gender in physical traits, did you mean like gender expression or something different? So I think this was at the beginning.
But yeah, I think gender expression, like I think what that is about is like that our race, gender expression, or perceived gender identity, height, like our physical body can influence how people perceive us, right? And so I think this also gets into like oppressive or biased dynamics of like somebody might see somebody who they perceive to be a Black cis man who's, I don't know, 6'2", and even if the person's body's movements are communicating like, no, actually I'm calm and chill, be perceived as aggressive, right? And so like our, like how we show up in the world and how people perceive us is going to impact like how they feel our body movements are communicating like surrender and calmness or communicating aggression. So like just those things, our identities and perceived identities factor into the ways that people receive us, whether we intend that or not. And I don't know why, but I'm not fancy or something, but I cannot see the Q&A questions. I could see that it was on, but I'm not fancy. So I'm a call on you for support. So no question, but one thing I noticed a lot of people around me doing is to make an observation about a situation and stop there. Then you are left to extrapolate or assume their feelings, needs, and what they want to do instead of them telling you, yeah, that's real. And you know, I think that's a beautiful offering. I think that's a beautiful question because, you know, I also see this in movement spaces where it was like, oh, we want to make the observations, or we want to make the critiques, or we want to make the like, I see this person doing this. And it's like, one of my herbalist teachers would be like, well, what are you doing? Like, how are we focusing on us, right? Or like, are you having a commentary because you want to transform or change something, or you want to add and build people? Or is it like critique for growth? Or are you having the observation because it's like centered in your own ego, or because you want to be right, or because you want to like be the person who has that knowledge, or because you want to gossip, right? Like and it's okay if that's why you want to do it, but just acknowledging that like sometimes people are noticing things, but they don't actually want resolution. And then maybe us like helping the person name that, like you making that observation, like where would you like to go from there? And then you can choose to engage with that person or not, right? Because I think a lot of us are not ready to be in deep communication with each other, because like I wish in kindergarten we had a conflict class. Like I don't know, I feel like we were stealing each other's, I don't think we're stealing, but we were like taking each other's toys in kindergarten or throwing things across the room. I'm like, if someone taught me like conflict resolution instead of like, and how to manage my emotions and like how to listen to my emotions, like that it was okay to feel or cry or get emotional, like if we learn that as young people, like how amazing would we be right now? And so I think that like MVC is a reminder of like, oh, we don't have to just observe, or we don't have to just say what's wrong. We also can be active and like saying, okay, what do we do? And how do we like create that together? But yeah, I definitely hear you. And I think, yeah, I hear you what you're saying. Like some people just go to the observation. So I would ask them like, do you make it like, what's next? What do you want to be next? And for the, how do you use MVC for someone who's inebriated and drunk? I think that when someone's inebriated or drunk, like that, we're moving more towards the de-escalation, right? Because our communication shifts, because being drunk like changes our ability to communicate. And so we could try using NVC, like, what do you need? You know, how can I help? And we might need to move more into the de-escalation for safety. And just because that person may not be able to, may not be in the mind space to be able to reason with you or to hear you or to know how to, like, if you're drunk, like usually like you're not in a space to like be able to be in the brain space to figure out or reason or like try and like get to the solution. Like you need kind of support then, because our like alcohol changes like our ability to like be to reason, basically. I'm trying to think of another word for it. Or to be in like logical thinking. Maybe this will help explain it. So I think that's like more so moving to it. Maybe people have done it. I've not seen the YouTube like talk about it, but maybe looking that up could help. And I hope the de-escalation strategies help with that too, when someone's like intoxicated and stuff. So what are the stages of escalation? So this kind of talks about like, you know, stages of escalation. This can happen like this, but it could also be super quick. Like we know from like someone can be calm at 1 minute, triggered in another minute, and then 40 seconds later be at their peak and screaming at the top of their lungs. So things shift. So if we're thinking about someone being calm and triggered, maybe agitated, that's the space where we're using nonviolent communication. When it begins to get to level 4, acceleration or peak, that is the time when we're trying to engage de-escalation to get to the 7th part, which is the recovery. And so one thing about like when someone's at their peak is that they're in kind of crisis thinking, right? Usually you're illogical, it's concrete, like, no, it can only be like this, I can only have this, this is all, like there's no possibility for flexibility. And you might be unfocused, like scattered, or like what's going on, or it's hard for that person to really like tune in to be able to share, to speak with them. And so when we want to move people to the non-crisis thinking of like being logical, being in tune with our emotions, being abstract, which is like, oh yeah, there's so many possibilities. We could do this, or maybe this is better. And that then they're able to reason with you, right? So because reasoning with someone who's enraged is not possible. They're just, because literally there's a chemical release in our brain when we're angry that like doesn't allow us to like process information. So if you think about a time where you like had a conversation with someone, you were so mad, and then after you're like, I don't even know what I said, I don't even know what I did. It's literally because there's a chemical that gets released that stops us from processing information when we are a certain amount of when we have a certain amount of anger. So we have to bring people down to the space where they can be able to hear and reason with us. And so I want to talk a little bit about some lists, or I have a question for you of like what traits and factors may trigger aggression. And folks can share in the chat. And I'll talk about the like disclaimers of this list in a moment. But what are some traits and factors that may trigger aggression in someone? Yeah, sarcasm, definitely. Like I don't even know how to work sarcasm, but some people don't like when you're being sarcastic. Some people do not respond the same way. Yeah, being corrected or being talked down to, definitely. What, like misgendering other comrades, definitely. Yeah. Perceived lack of control or agency. Yeah, people can feel aggressive when they don't feel like they have control. Being in someone's personal space, explaining, yeah, like trying to like explain to someone what they should know about this system or this thing. starting to talk over or louder than someone, your needs not being met, not being heard. Yeah, definitely. So some other traits and factors that can contribute to aggression, and this is, I always give a disclaimer around this, it's like mental health and mental illness, is that because someone has mental health struggles, or because somebody is mentally ill, does not mean that they are aggressive. And there's definitely like stigma against mental illness in our society. It means that because of sometimes some mental illnesses can affect our brain chemistry, it can mean that could lead to being aggressive faster, or it could be a trait in that person being more aggressive, right? It's not like people are mentally ill so they're aggressive, because I think that in society there's definitely stigma around mental illness. And so I just want to offer that as like, that's not what this is saying. This is saying this is one of the things that can influence it. Other things are substance abuse, and not substance use, but like substance abuse. And we also know that like there's safe substance use sites, and it's not a judgment around like people using, it's just saying that our use of substance can influence our aggression. A personal history of abuse can influence our aggression. Highly stressful situations like failing an exam, the pandemic, a school rejection letter, job loss, the death of a loved one, eviction, which people are going through right now during a pandemic, right? Physical disabilities or chronic pain, a prior history of violence, certain feelings like you named, like feeling powerlessness or fear or grief or a feeling of injustice or being humiliated, that those can trigger our aggression. And this is like obviously not a comprehensive list, and you all name a lot more in the chat. And so what are some like common signs, like when you're agitated, what do you do? Because I know when I'm agitated, like I do this thing, like, and I try to do it so the person's not looking, but I like definitely like will roll my eyes up, like look up, like, like I kind of like do that a lot. Like when I'm talking to someone and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't really agree with you. So what are some other like common signs of agitation that you might do when you're feeling agitated, or that you notice? Pacing, definitely. Going silent, sighing, tapping your foot. Yes, checking watch. Like I remember my grandmother would just be shaking her leg, like just on the chair, just shaking her leg mad fast. I'm like, where's the leg going? I don't know. But definitely this tapping, shaking, doing the bitch face. Yes. Starting to tear up when I get angry. Me too. When I be having big emotions, I start to tear up. And then I'm like, why am I tearing up? Like, why am I tearing up? Like, that really does happen to me. Stop responding or subtly making faces. Yeah. A voice crack. Yeah, people saying same about the face, about the crying too. Yeah. Tears are big. They're like, let's release. Let's really release. Shaking, definitely. So there's all these ways that we might see in our body language, again, around like our bodies being these communicators, trying to tell us something, also trying to like also release and heal and regulate itself. Somebody said heavy breathing. Haha, not sure if it's because I'm a Black woman, but all the strong Black women I know suck their teeth and do that tisking sound. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I feel like I used to suck my teeth that much when I was a kid, and now I don't do it as much. And then people be like, don't you suck your teeth? You know, I feel like that was like an elder thing to say to other people, but I feel I don't suck my teeth as much as I used to, but definitely sucking your teeth. Someone say yes, Amanda. Yeah, so some other common signs of agitation are raised voice, bald fist, rapid speech, erratic movements, pacing, fidgeting, excessive sweating, although all of these things, it doesn't mean you're agitated, it just be factors. Cursing, excessive hand gestures, shaking, aggressive posture, definitely. Clenching your jaw, yeah. Yeah. So all of these things, like we're noticing, like that we might do, or we might experience others doing, could show us that a person is agitated. It doesn't mean like that they are agitated. Now, also, again, like this is where bias plays in. It's like, just because someone's I use excessive hand gestures all the time, and I talk real loud, and I make erratic movements, and I speak fast, doesn't mean that I'm agitated. And so sometimes people might misinterpret that. And I also feel like that happens to working with young people, like teenagers. It's like their emotions are big. And sometimes like they're doing things and it doesn't mean that they're frustrated or agitated. And so also like really trying to set the context and having enough self-awareness and collective awareness to like approach with curiosity instead of just thinking someone is agitated. What could be perceived as an aggressive posture? I feel like standing like sometimes, I mean, all things would be considered as an aggressive posture depending on who's doing it because of people's own bias. But I don't know, let me try to think of an example. Maybe like balled fist, like if someone's fist is a ball, or if someone's hands is in someone else's face, or someone's pointing, like those might be, or someone's towering over someone, or someone's arms are crossed. Yeah, I don't know if people have other examples in the chat, definitely. Thank you for lifting that one up, the crossed arms. So those might be considered like aggressive postures. So now we're going to get into what is de-escalation. So we talked a little bit about it, but what else comes up for you when you hear the word de-escalation? Like, what does it mean to you? Or how have you tried to de-escalate? Or when you think of the word de-escalation, what are you thinking about? A sigh of relief. Yeah, thank you. Bringing new perspectives in hopes to resolve a situation. Reaching reasonable communication, definitely. Looking to repair, yeah. Reflecting and redirecting energy from the conflict. Yeah, so de-escalation can look like many things. And so some of the goals of de-escalation is at the moment, we want to reduce the level of anxiety and agitation. We don't want to necessarily reason with someone, or like we might not even be able to get to repair when we're de-escalating. Because sometimes it's just in that moment, like how are we keeping ourselves safe? How are we decreasing the level of conflict and tension just so everybody can like be safe and cared for? That involves throwing our ego out of the window, right? That it's not about being right. It's about like, how are we caring for and showing up for each other? And so that's like big work for like ego work of like, okay, right now, it's not about me like teaching this person or telling this person, like, here's the history of patriarchy and heteronormativity. Like that might not be the space for it, or white supremacy. Like right now might just be like safety. That's the goal. So one of the things that, this is from the Center for Anti-Violence Education, I developed it with my team there, we like to think about is BAP. So it's not a word, but it's a fake word. And some of those is just breathing. So I like to do this breath that actually reduces anxiety, but maybe you can't do it there, but I'll teach it to you at the end, I think. But another breath is just deep breathing. So maybe we can take like 2 really deep breaths, like filling in our diaphragm right now, because our breath actually like regulates our nervous system. And so even if we just take 3 deep breaths, that might drastically change how we respond. Because 1, it just gives us a moment to pause. And then 2, it gives us your body a moment to say, wait, actually, am I okay right now? What can I do right now? Am I in my body right now? And then 3, it supports your immune system to just heal itself. And then also about our breath being super powerful is in the book You Belong, there's a conversation about breath being one of our only our only organ that both operates involuntarily. So we don't have to remind ourselves to breathe, but we can also control it. And so it's been used for thousands of years to heal ourselves. And in any culture, there's breath work used as healing. And so breath is super powerful. I mean, we can't like control how fast our heart beats or control like our digestive system. We can't control those systems, but we can control our breathing, and it just happens. Thank God I don't have to remind myself to breathe, because I'm sure a lot of us will forget. So let's take a couple of deep breaths right now. I count in, just breathing in for 3. I'm gonna hold for 3. Holding for 1, 2, 3. And releasing for 1, 2, 3. You do it one more time, breathing in for 1, 2, 3. Holding for 1, 2, 3, and releasing for 1, 2, 3. So imagine, like, and we don't have to tell nobody we breathe it either. Like someone says that, we could just be like, just gently be breathing. Like if we did that before we like responded when we're upset with a friend or upset with somebody, or, like sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I would have just took one more moment before I said that thing that now escalated the situation. So like giving ourselves the gift of breath is really important. And then also like awareness of our triggers, that it's okay that we have triggers, that we live in this world. And there's so much, not only our own stories, but the stories that live on in us from our ancestors and the way they've learned to protect ourselves that live in our bodies. So it's okay. Like sometimes, like I was talking to somebody about like our genetics, and like sometimes people will have like a fear of dogs, but it's like nothing ever happened to have that fear of dogs. And it's like that might be an ancestral memory that got placed into your DNA to protect you, right? And now you're like, I don't like dogs. So just knowing like what your triggers are, what makes you react, and paying attention to that, like that is a powerful tool, so that you are and then able to say, no, I can't right now because I'm too triggered, or I'm realizing I'm triggered right now. Let me calm myself down so that I can have more choice. And then positioning yourself for safety and projecting calm. Even if we're not calm, projecting calm is a super important tool for being able to help. Because if we're agitated too, or if we're irritated, or if we're scared, maybe that means right now we're not the most effective person. And we can talk about like, maybe you delegate that task. Yes. Someone said the word of like intergenerational trauma. And there's intergenerational trauma. And man, I love Instagram quotes. And there's also like some Instagram quotes like, we also have intergenerational power in our DNA, and that's how we survived. So we have the trauma, and we also have the power and the information that's like, I'm not going to give, like even in some of us, like I know my mom has a certain gene for a certain sickness, and like her like family has struggled with it, but we don't have it. And my mom like wears like, I don't know, she wears like really thick glasses. And me and my brother both have really good vision, right? So sometimes our DNA is like, also, we're not going to give you all the things or give you some of the things, or you'll have like, it's different, right? So it's like not always like our genes also are doing different things all the time. And so like, as much as trauma can be passed down, power can be passed down. So part of positioning yourself for safety is like, if you are standing and if you're able to stand, standing firmly on both feet, being aware of where your exits are. Like if you're in a train station, where are your exits? If you're on the street and you're like, it's dark, where could you go for a safe place? Like, are there any stores open? If you're in a closed space, like where are the doors? Like where are the emergency exits? Being aware of places or people around you that may be able to help you or maybe a threat. This especially is useful for if you are triggered, or if you are in a place that like has rules, right? If you're in a grocery store and something happens, you know that you might be able to call on a grocery store clerk or a manager or somebody stocking in the aisles, right? Like our context can influence how we de-escalate. And so it's important to think about that. And we might be able to delegate to other people, like keeping your hands, if you're able to, available and out of your pockets. And like in this kind of position was kind of like, I'm surrendering. Like I'm not trying to escalate things right now. Like, and also keeping your hands available means that you're able to then like move, block if you need to. And also positioning yourself in a way that you're able to like, if you're able to swiftly move out of the situation. And then conveying confident body language. So keeping your head up, looking towards the person. If not in the eye, make sure you can see what the person is doing. And then again, like thinking about our positionality, so our identities. So not only our identities we hold, but the identities people perceive us as, right? Because we know some of the identities we can't see, but people assume. So thinking about our identities and perceived identities in terms of race, gender, ability, age, and how those might inform the tactics we use. So being aware of also our privileges and how those can be used to think about like how we can be de-escalating. And something about that I want to share is like, if, for example, like the young teenagers that I work with, like young Black teenagers that I work with are going through a conflict, like I know that I'm seen to them like as an adult, like in a hierarchical way, right? And so maybe I'm not the most effective person in that situation. So maybe I can like ask a peer of theirs, like, hey, can you just check in with them? And because of that, they might be able to be, and I can give them some tips and then they could be more effective, right? So just thinking about how, or if it's a stranger situation, like somebody might respond very different. Like if someone's harassing someone for being Black and you're also Black, like you might have to use different tactics than if you're a white person, right? So like thinking about like how you're perceived and like trying to delegate or understand your identity in terms of how you might de-escalate, because it does impact it, like we know that. And then now we're going to talk about like, okay, what we don't usually talk about what we don't do, but I think this is really important actually. So in de-escalation, we don't want to, we have these like tacos, things that we don't want to do. So one of those things are we don't want to threaten somebody. We don't want to argue. We don't want to challenge. We don't want to order, and we don't want to shame. Why don't we want to do anything? Because if these things were done to you, if you were threatened, argued with, challenged, bossed around, or shamed, does that bring up healing or does that bring up de-escalation? No, it can be re-triggering, or that person can feel like, okay, now I'm going to take my problem to you, or now you're going to be part of the conflict, right? And so it's actually just not an effective strategy. And I also like to go over this because I think a lot of our communities, like at least for me, when I grew up, like shame was a big tool. And even in activist circles, sometimes shame is a big tool for accountability or de-escalation. It's like, is shame actually that effective, or is challenging or arguing always that effective in trying to get someone to shift or change or de-escalate a moment? Not always. And most of the time, not like that can trigger someone. So just knowing that those are things, especially when it's strangers, we don't want to do these things. And so then what do we want to do? So these de-escalations are also developed with CAE, and I just shorten them down so we can learn them because I think they're helpful. So this strategy is called gambling. So one of those strategies that we could use for gambling is getting to we. So how do we like foster a sense of unity? Like sometimes when someone's so we see somebody arguing on the street and like you think it's about to escalate and you feel safe, you said you've done your internal assessment and your external assessment, and you're like, I'm safe here. I got 3 friends with me. I think I'm outside. I can leave if I want. I'm going to try to de-escalate. Like getting to we is a way to not like start accusing or be like, you need to stop, or what are you doing? Or isolating the person or judging the person. Getting to we is a way to like foster a sense of unity. So it's not like you're aligning with the person who's being oppressive or causing the harm. It's just saying, let's think about like, we're all here together dealing with this, right? So you might say, we just want to make sure everything's okay. We really want to make sure everyone gets home safe. How can we help? What do we need to do? Why don't we just take a few steps back? Why don't we take a few steps back from each other and we could talk over here about what's going on, right? So just using the word we can make that person feel like you're not attacking them. When I can write out the tacos in the chat, I see that question. Order, and maybe when we do the Q&A, I'll post some of the links to some of these tools so you have them. So match and lead to step it down. Oh, offer alternatives. Also, another thing is like if someone's in a conflict, if we're ordering them around, then it doesn't give choice and agency. So even if you don't want to give someone agency who's being rude, like offering alternatives makes it seem like they have choice, right? So like, say someone's arguing in a store, like, and we could be like, why don't we step outside? Or, why don't we talk over here? I really want to hear what you have to say. Or is it possible that we could like lower our voice a little bit? Or like, you could also ask the person who they're talking to, like, hey, do you want to walk over here with me? Right? So giving some options for what could happen. Another thing to do is match and lead to step it down. So say you're in a situation and someone's screaming at the top of their lungs. So if we come in and we're like, I just want to see what's going on, like super low whisper, one, they might not hear you. Two, they might think you're being patronizing. Or three, they might think you'd be like demeaning and condescending. And they might not even like hear what you have to say. So if we thinking about this peak level of someone screaming, there are something in our brain that's called mirror neurons. And so I was just reading a little bit about this, and my coworker talks about this a lot. Like, so our mirror neurons are basically things that we have developed as animals, beings, that allow us to connect. And so they first found this out, I think, because like it was actually like a scientist was eating, and an animal started mirroring eating, and they realized, oh, we actually like connect as people. So a real simple example of that is like when someone's hand gets stuck in a door and you flinch also, even though it wasn't you. Or if someone like steps on a piece of glass and you're like, oh, like, or like anytime you've like seen someone else like go through something, you kind of like scrunch up your face too. If they taste something sour and you're like, also with them. Like those are our mirror neurons that are connecting us. And perhaps they develop to have more human empathy and compassion. They also happen with other animals. So I'm not quite sure why mirror neurons, but if you feel like a geek and want to look them up, like why they develop, but whatever it is, it means that we mirror each other. And you even might notice if someone's talking a certain way or moving their hands, you might start to do that as well. So our mirror neurons mean that match and lead could be like, if someone's screaming at the top of their lungs, you might not scream, but you might get to that volume and then slowly bring your volume down, and that person may begin to mirror you. So why that's effective is because if you tell someone to stop screaming when they're screaming, likely not going to do it, right? But this way, that person doesn't even know. And when someone stops screaming, maybe their shoulders release and their heart rate drops, and then they're more able to reason with from that point. So I might say, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, like, well, I hear you. Why don't we go over here and talk about this more, right? So I might just match their vocal intensity one time, not their tone, just their intensity, and bring it down slowly. Another thing to use is broken record. So another, like I talked to you before about like the chemical in our brain that might make us not process information. So one tool we can use when someone's in a conflict, say two people are arguing and you can't get a word in, is just like, I really hear you. Can we talk about this? I really hear you. Can we talk about this over here? I really hear you. Can we talk about this over there? So like just repeating the same thing over and over, it may sound silly, but the person might not hear you to the fourth time. So that could happen, like if even in a like IPV, DV dispute, right? Like using broken record could be a strategy. Also losing to win. So picking your battle, right? So like if our goal is safety, like sometimes we have to take like some loss. So say someone's attacking someone on the train or harassing someone on the train and making like messed up remarks to them. Like maybe the best option is to get that person off the next stop. Like the loss is like that person got off at the wrong stop. You had to get off the train, your work day or wherever you were going was interrupted. But the win is that person is safe, right? So we are always actively making choices to ensure our safety. And so sometimes we might have to kind of pick our battles around what we do. Also around like, if someone's going through a dispute and like that person knows each other and it seems really dangerous and you can't stop it right there. Like if something's going on in your building, maybe like the next time you see that person, you're like, hey, I wanted to just check in on you. I'm your neighbor. I noticed what happened last week. Like here are some resources you could have, and having resources for them of like centers or hotlines they could call, right? Like that might be another way, like picking your battle. Like, in the moment it might be dangerous. And then using I statements. So to refrain from the accusatory kind of, you need to do this, or you need to, or you're being disrespectful, or you're being aggressive, like to refrain from the you, which could make a person feel more aggravated. We might try and use I statements. So saying, I'm feeling nervous. I don't want anybody to get hurt right now. Or I hear you and I really want to help. How can I help? How about we talk about this? Let's move away and talk about this. I'm really sorry this is happening. So just keeping it on the I so that that person doesn't feel like you're starting to attack them. And then naming the behavior. Sometimes we're not specific when someone's doing something harmful. Like if someone's holding someone's arm, we might be like, you're hurting them, right? And that's like not being specific. If that person's really angry, they might not even be like able to hear that. So saying like, I see that you're holding their arm. Can you please release their arm? Or you're blocking the door. Can we please take a step back from the door so we can get through? So naming the specific behavior and what you want them to change so that person can make that change or adjustment instead of like speaking in generalizations. Because when people are in a conflict agitation mode, like they need the most concrete things to be able to make a shift. So another tip is like, these are not comprehensive. If one doesn't work, you can try any combination. And that if you're going to approach someone who's being aggressive, we really recommend that you not approach from behind because that could be seen as threatening and they might hit you, or from face on, because if someone gets in your face, that's seen as confrontational. We're also still in a pandemic, so we don't want to even be that close. So staying at least 6 feet apart, and approaching from the side. And so when you approach from the side, that gives you space to leave if you want. That gives that person space to leave if you want. And it just ensures your safety a little bit better. So what if they don't immediately change your risky behavior? So a lot of times, that's a great question. Our goal in conflict and in situations is to get the person who is being attacked out of that situation. So we might even cause a distraction, right? We might drop something really loudly, or we might say like, someone's coming, or we might be like, oh, actually, if someone's harassing someone on a train, like, or being creepy, we might go up to them and act like, oh, hey, I know you, like, how are you doing? And act like we know the person they're harassing. Or talk, if you feel comfortable directly talking to the harasser, saying like, I'm really lost. Can you tell me if this is my right train stop? Can you help me get to the right stop, right? Like, so causing a distraction or delegating other people on the train, or like trying to get the person, even if it's for 3 seconds, out of that situation. What were examples to lose the wind? A lose the wind was like, if someone's being harassed on a train and you have to get them out. Another thing is like there's been instances where someone's trying to rob someone, right? And it's like, okay, if you have to give away your wallet to ensure your personal safety, maybe you give away your wallet. Like that's what has to happen for that. And like sometimes people have pride. Like someone steps to them and tries to do something, they're like, no, I'm not giving that, or no, I'm not doing that. Or someone's like really angry and you're in a close proximity, and they're like, I've seen people like just be like, especially in New York, like move out the way or move, and somebody might be too prideful to move, just being like, no, it's okay, we're gonna move. Like those are kind of situations where you might lose to win, right? Because it's like, obviously someone should stand where they want, no one should be robbed, but if this is happening, and to ensure your larger safety, we might have to make sacrifices. I hope that helped for examples. Yeah, so another thing around safety stance, and this is like from CA2, and I don't do as much of a self-defense program, but I can share with you some things, is that you want to maintain a distance. You want to keep more than 2 arms distance away from the person who's being aggressive. You want to position your body at a 45-degree angle. I'm really good at angles. So 45 degrees. So right like this, we're full body on. So giving a 45-degree, one that allows us to have like our foot, like if we're able to stand, and that allows us to have our foot slightly back so that we're already ready to, if we have to run. So this is like if you're able to stand. If you're seated, if you're on a chair and you're able to use your arms, like still positioning your arms like this, like kind of like in a surrender mode. That way, if that person hits you, you can go into blocking, right? We can go into blocks. We won't do blocks today, but I'll tell you about CAE's self-defense classes. And just having your hands that convey like de-escalation, because also like there might be times where you need to like get something to protect yourself, but we want to make slow and calm movements, because a sudden movement could agitate or make a person think you're trying to like escalate the situation. So we want to move slowly, like, I'm just going to move my hands down, even if we are getting something to protect ourselves. So that there's an element of surprise if we need to go there. So those are our de-escalation strategies. I almost want to like stop the share so I can share them with you in the chat. I might do that because I think it's easier to have. And then we're going to talk about like, how would we de-escalate? So I'm posting some of the handouts in the chat that I just went over with you, just so you could have them. And then we'll talk about a scenario. Yeah, this might be the easiest. Okay, so let me reshare my screen. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I just sent handouts so folks can have that as a resource. So a situation, you're in a subway and see someone following a person and making lewd remarks. The person seems scared and is going towards a more empty part of the subway. So what would you do to support? So what are some ways folks might use these de-escalation tools that we just went over? What are some ideas? I can go back to the last slide so we can see the Camden strategies. So someone's like making new remarks in a subway station. What might we do to de-escalate? Any ideas? I can name a couple. I can go through it, a couple. Like one, oh, I see somebody. Somebody said maybe distract. Yeah, maybe like you distract the person by like saying, hey, excuse me, I was wondering like, you know how to get to I don't know, Atlantic Moore, or I was wondering if you knew how to get to 21st Street. I don't know why you're going to 21st Street, but anything that you could do to distract, like, yeah, that could be a good strategy, definitely. Or like dropping something in front of them or moving in front of them to like, so that they don't see, they lose sight of the person. Someone said, I've seen an example of acting like you know the person being followed and lead them to a safe place. Definitely, this could be a very effective strategy in the subway, right? Like saying like, oh, hey, you can make up a name. Hey, hey, friend, like, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. Where have you been? Like, thank you for meeting me here. Sorry, I know we got lost. Like, let's head to our destination, right? And then getting them out of the subway station. To move with the person being harassed and talking to them so they don't see them alone. So even if you don't know them, just like moving with them and being like, hey, I'm walking with you now. I statement.
Donnay, I think you're frozen. So maybe try turning your video off for a minute and then see if it restarts. Thank you, Ebony. So Ebony is gonna work on bringing Donnay back to us. Thank y'all for your patience, and definitely encourage folks while we're waiting for Donnay to come back to take a look at the handouts that she shared with us in the chat. And for folks who are joining from the live stream on YouTube, I'm also going to be adding those to the Padlet and sharing that, the link to that in the chat as well.
Hi, my okay, I think it worked again. My connection just dropped, sorry. But we are going with the flow. I'll just be joining two places. I'll join in two places so that you could, just to make sure we're good. Thank you for your patience. So I saw some of the responses in the chat. Thank you, Allison and folks, for holding things down. And yeah, I think the last thing I saw, and I'll just start from there, is like the going towards the person who was being like the harasser or following someone is like, the one thing about that, or if you're going to say something to them, is like, you're in a subway station. So it's a closed environment. Whereas on the street, if there's other people around, or in a park, or where you can, if you're on a street with a lot of businesses that you can go inside a business, or you're in a hospital or a bit like a grocery store, like I would say there's more people around who could help. But if you're in the subway and there's not a lot of people, and you would approach the person who's harassing, and they get aggressive, and there's less like in safety measures, and it's super thin on a subway platform. So that's my only thing about like, it's so important about our context, right? Like where we are, who we're with, will influence how we, even if we normally feel comfortable talking to someone who's being who's harassing or being aggressive, like thinking about like the context of a subway could be really like, could shift that choice. So that's, I just wanted to respond to that. And I think I missed some of those ideas, but I think in the interest of time, we named a lot of them. So like pretending you know the person, walking with the person, getting them out of that space to a safe business, and then maybe checking in, like, how are you doing? And then like one thing that, so there's so many different things that we can do, and it's going to depend on our comfort, on our context, on our safety and the person who we're helping safety. And that's okay. We can have multiple strategies and our identities, and that is like perfectly fine to influence it. And then I also wanted to really emphasize, like, what do we do after to care for ourselves? Because we can experience vicarious trauma. So even if we didn't experience the event ourselves, so just someone telling a story of their trauma can traumatize us. Just witnessing something traumatic can traumatize us. And trauma lives in our body. So even if we don't remember it, like the way we might hold ourselves, our tension, like it's going to live in us. And so caring for our bodies is super important. And so how do we build care practices rather than coping, like things that are like deepening our body care? So like getting more sleep that night, or talking to a loved one, or having like a really hot shower or bath with herbs that relax us, or taking a walk outside in a park with nature with lots of fresh air, right? Or meditating, like something that's like deeply going to care for ourselves. And then allowing whatever you feel to arise. Like I know sometimes I'm in this like world and I'm like, gotta go. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, do I even know how I'm feeling? And when you don't, like that can manifest in like headaches, physical ailments, like backaches or insomnia. So like allowing ourselves to feel is so important. And then returning to our breath to regulate our nervous system. And the last is like obviously what I think AO, the Abolitionist Youth Organizing, like it's trying to do with you all is create communities that are engaged in community organizing, because a lot of these situations are not just like one-off instances. They are things that we need to like practice. And then you make a team that's like, we're the de-escalation team and we're going to go out and de-escalate community things, or we're going to be the people who de-escalate tension in our workplace or with our organization. Like that's going to be our role, and just engaging in community organizing in general ways to prevent IPV, domestic violence, to figure out what we're going to do outside of punitive systems. So some of the key takeaways is that there's multiple solutions, that there will always be times to intervene, that believe in people's capacity to support one another, and that you doing something encourages others to, and like to continue to work to learn about systems of oppression and what structural changes are needed along with those one-time events. And so I just wanted to take a moment to do one last exercise, that it would just be 1 minute. And that is, so in the workbook, there's a page that's about like our gut health, and the hormone that's produced in our body, serotonin, that is like our joy and happiness, is the same thing that's used to process our food in our digestive system. So our serotonin is like, that's for our joy. It's also supporting our digestive tract. So if we think about like how our gut is the power, it's the power of our ancestors, it's the healing energy, sunlight, like part of our body. Our belly button is what connected us in our womb to our parent. So like our stomach, and also like before we were like a top-down brain world, a lot of cultures were like listening to your core, right? And we operated from our core. And so there's an activity around like coloring, like what do you want your core to feel like after you like felt centered? Like how do you want to feel? Like what color is that? And if you can hold your core now and imagine like what is the colors you want your digestive system to have? What are the feelings you want to have when you're trying to de-escalate or when you're moving through conflict? Like how do you want to feel? Maybe I'm getting like really light blues that are like calming. And then I'll teach you one last breath, then I'll open it up for questions, which is this breath that's the B breath. So in this breath, you would close, and I show first, you would close. Ooh, yeah, please put your colors in the chat. Someone said lilac. That is beautiful. I want to give folks a moment to put your colors in the chat of what do you want your digestive system to feel like when you're moving through conflict, or when you're trying to de-escalate. Any other colors? Green, beautiful. Maybe white, like purity, beautiful. Yeah, super cleansing. Ooh, like a rose pink. Those are beautiful colors. Yeah. So I'm going to share one last breath, and I'm going to open up for questions just in a minute, which is to put our thumbs, if you can, on your ear, like on your tragus, and you just push down gently. And then you'll kind of see that it kind of changes how you're able to hear, if you're able to hear it. So you can put your thumbs here and then gently put your fingers you can put them onto your eyebrows and one maybe onto your eyelids. And you are going to actually hum. So you can say the letter M like, and when you do that with like this, you'll feel the vibration like all throughout your face. So you can just start to, now just let you carry that breath if you want to practice. Sometimes I do that like 3 times, but you can start to feel the vibration through your face. And it's a really good breath to do when you're feeling stress and anxiety, or like have tension headaches, to release it. And if you start to practice enough, you really feel the vibration all the way through. And so I just want to offer like deep gratitude to you all. It's a reminder that returning to our breath is some of our greatest like friends and our comfort. And we have our breath with us as long as we are alive. And so just offering a thank you for everybody who put this together, for all the ASL interpreters, for Allison, Ebony, all those who worked to put this together, and to Mariam Kaba and all of you for participating. I love your colors. of lilac and green and white and rose pink as we move through conflict with more grace with each other and more tools. So thank you. I'll save any questions. And I'll turn it back over to Allison.
Hey y'all, thank you so much, Donnay, for such an amazing, beautifully facilitated session. We so appreciate all of your offerings and examples. And just want to check in before we do close out this space. And thank you for offering these affirmations in the chat also. Do want to check in and see if anybody does have any other questions that are coming up for them as we close out session. I know we were able to move through questions as they were coming up during session, and just want to check and see if there's any as we close out. So I'll just give a moment for folks in Zoom or also on the chat to name any of those questions that y'all might have. And it looks like there aren't any questions right now. If any come up while I'm closing out, we'll definitely uplift them. Again, thank you so much to Donnay. And also again to our interpreters, Juan and Trisha. Thank you, Teddy, our captioner, Laura, who will be doing graphic notes, Abinay for the tech, Paige, and also Hope and Sophie and the folks at Barnard Center for Research on Women for supporting with this live stream. For folks who are watching this back later, loving all the affirmations that are coming through in the chat. And I do want to invite folks to come to our final session that we have today. That will be on the intersections of environmental justice and abolition. That will be happening from 3 to 6 p.m. today, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm gonna drop the link in the chat for folks who wanna attend that session. Would be super excited to have you. And yeah, thank y'all so much. Hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Take these colors with you and enjoy the start of the weekend, y'all. Thanks so much.